They say a woman who has been truly betrayed carries a certain kind of silence. Not the silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the silence of someone who has seen too much, felt too much, and decided, for now, to hold it inside like a stone at the bottom of a river. Heavy. Still. Waiting. I carried that silence for a long time. I carried it to work. I carried it to bed. I carried it into rooms full of laughter where I smiled with my mouth but my eyes were somewhere else entirely. I carried it the way you carry something that belongs to you even though you never asked for it, never wanted it, and would give anything to put it down. This is the story of how I picked it up. His name was Benjamin. And before I tell you what he did, I need to tell you who I was before he came. Because that part matters. That part is the part people always skip, and it is the reason the story never makes complete sense when they tell it. I was 24 years old and I was doing fine. Not fine in the way people say when they are not actually fine. Fine in the real, honest way. I had a small apartment that I paid for myself. I had a job that was not glamorous but it was mine and it paid on time and I was grateful for it. I had a routine. I woke early, I made my tea, I went to work, I came home, I cooked, I read, I slept. My life was not exciting but it was stable and stability, I had learned early, was not something to take for granted. My mother had raised my sister and me alone after our father left when I was 9 years old. She did not raise us with money. She raised us with discipline and a particular kind of love that does not spoil you but also never lets you doubt that you are wanted. She used to say, Adis, life will bring you many things with 2 hands. Learn to look at both hands before you take what is being offered. I was 24 and I thought I understood what she meant. I did not understand what she meant. My sister Chisholm was 2 years younger than me. She was the beautiful one, people always said, and I never minded because it was simply true and beauty was not a competition I had entered. She was lighter-skinned, louder, funnier in a room full of people. She drew attention the way certain flowers draw bees, not by trying, simply by being. We were close in the way sisters are close when they have only had each other and their mother. We fought about small things and forgave each other quickly and at the end of the day we were in each other's corner without negotiation. I say all of this because I want you to understand what I had before Benjamin came. I want you to understand what was whole, and then you will understand what it meant when things broke. I met him at a mutual friend's birthday gathering on a Saturday evening in March. It was the kind of gathering that happens in Lagos, too many people in a medium-sized flat, music a little too loud, food that disappears faster than it arrives, everyone performing a version of themselves that is slightly more confident than the weekday version. I was there because my friend Rosie had begged me to come and I had run out of excuses. I noticed Benjamin because he was not performing. That was the thing. Everyone around him was doing that thing people do at parties, laughing a little too hard, talking a little too much, looking around to see who was looking at them. And he was just sitting. Calm. A cup in his hand. Watching people with the quiet curiosity of someone who finds human beings genuinely interesting. I remember thinking, that man is comfortable with himself. It was attractive. Not his face, though his face was fine. His stillness. His ease. The way he did not seem to need the room to notice him. He noticed me noticing him and he smiled. Not an aggressive smile. A small, unhurried smile like someone who has time. We talked for most of that evening. He was easy to talk to in a way that surprised me. He asked questions and then actually listened to the answers instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. He remembered things I said 10 minutes earlier and referenced them later in the conversation. He laughed at things that were genuinely funny and did not perform laughter when they were not. By the time I left that night I had given him my number and I was already composing in my head the version of the story I would tell Ngozi the next day. He texted the same night. Just, I enjoyed talking to you tonight. Simple. No performance. I texted back. And that was how it started. For the first month, everything was slow and warm and easy. He called in the evenings. We talked about ordinary things, work, family, what we wanted from life, the kind of small revealing conversations that build something between two people without either of them announcing that something is being built. He was attentive in a way I was not used to. Not overwhelming. Not suffocating. Just present. A good morning text that did not demand a response. A call to ask if I had eaten. Small things that accumulated into a feeling of being held. He told me about his childhood, a father who worked too hard and a mother who compensated by being soft. He told me he had been hurt before, that a woman he thought he would marry had left him for his closest friend, and that after that he had built a wall around himself and was still, slowly, learning to take it down. He said he had not felt safe with anyone in a long time. I was moved by this. I am not ashamed to say that. I was moved because it matched something in me that also wanted to be safe, that also knew what it was to feel exposed and then hurt. We recognized something in each other, or I believed we did. That is the cruelest part of what came later. The recognition felt real. Whatever he manufactured, whatever he performed, the feeling it produced in me was genuine. My feelings were real. And real feelings do not simply disappear when you discover they were built on lies. They stay in your body long after your mind knows the truth. By the second month, we were spending most weekends together. By the third month, it was understood, though never announced, that we were in a relationship. He met Chisholm and was warm and easy with her, teasing her about something she said and making her laugh. He met my mother when she visited and he was respectful in exactly the right way, not trying too hard, not performing deference, just genuinely courteous. My mother pulled me aside in the kitchen and said, "This one has good manners." I flushed with something that felt embarrassingly close to pride. I did not see it coming. I want to be honest about that. I was not a naive person. I had been in relationships before. I had been hurt before in the small ordinary ways that teach you to be careful. But what Benjamin did was not careless or clumsy. It was patient. Deliberate. He built trust the way you build a structure, slowly, foundation first, making sure each layer was solid before adding the next. By the time the structure was complete, I had moved inside it. I was living inside something he had built. And I did not notice that he had also built the exits. The money started small. I want to talk about this clearly because it is the part that people judge most, and the judgment usually comes from people who have never been inside a relationship where money and love became tangled in a way that was impossible to separate. It started small. He was in between contracts, he worked in logistics, or said he did, and he needed transport money for a meeting that could lead to something big. Could I help? Just until Friday. I gave it without thinking. Of course. This was my person. Friday came and went. He did not mention it. I did not ask. Because asking felt like distrust and distrust felt like the opposite of what we were building. This is how it works. You tell yourself a story about generosity. About being the kind of partner who does not keep score. About love being bigger than money. And all of those stories are true in the right circumstances. But they can also be the exact stories a certain kind of person needs you to believe in order to take from you without consequence. Over the following months the amounts grew. Not in big sudden jumps that would have alarmed me. In small gradual increases that each felt like a variation of what had already been established. His rent was due and his payment from a client was delayed. Could I cover it just this once? He would pay me back double. His phone broke and he needed a new one to manage his business. Could I lend him the money until end of month? He had an opportunity to purchase goods at a discount and needed capital. Could I contribute and he would return it with profit? I gave. Not always easily. Sometimes I gave when I had to calculate very carefully whether I had enough left for my own needs. Sometimes I skipped things I wanted in order to make sure he was okay. But I gave because in my head I had decided that this man was my future, and you invest in your future. You do not count the cost of watering a garden you intend to eat from. He said things that fed this belief. You are the only person who has ever truly supported me. When I make it, everything I have is yours. I am going to spend the rest of my life making this up to you. I am building something for us. Hold on just a little longer. I held on. There was a period of about 4 months, I think it was around the 8 or 9 month mark of our relationship, when I was essentially supporting him completely. His rent, his food, his transport, his phone bills, occasional clothing. I was doing this on a salary that was comfortable for one person and stretched for two. I was not sleeping well. I was anxious in a way I could not explain to anyone because explaining it would have required admitting what was happening and I was not ready to see it clearly yet. Chisholm noticed. She did not say anything directly, that was not her way, but she started asking questions. How is Benjamin doing? Is he working now? Did that contract come through? Her questions were gentle but I heard what was underneath them. I deflected. I defended. I told her things were temporary, that he was in a difficult season, that she did not understand what it meant to be in a serious relationship where you supported each other through the hard parts. She let it go. She should not have let it go. But she loved me and she did not want to fight with me and so she let it go. What I did not know, and what I would not know for several more months, was that around this same time, something had shifted between Chisholm and Benjamin that I was not present for. I have tried many times to reconstruct the timeline, to identify the moment, the first conversation, the first thing that was said that should not have been said. I cannot reconstruct it fully. What I know is what I was told later, in pieces, by a sister who was too ashamed to tell it all at once. It started with proximity. Benjamin came to my apartment often and Chisholm was there often and so they were in the same space, sharing the same ordinary moments, meals, television, conversations that I was sometimes part of and sometimes not. He was charming. He had always been charming. He turned that charm toward her in the casual way that had first attracted me, and she responded the way most people responded to Benjamin when he was performing warmth. She felt seen. She felt special. I was not there for the conversation that changed things. I was at work. He had come to the apartment. I had given him a key months earlier, a decision I would revisit in my mind many times afterward, and Chisholm was there, and something happened between them that moved from ordinary to something else. I do not know exactly what was said. I know only that by the time I came home that evening, nothing in the room looked different but something in the air had shifted, and I felt it without knowing what I was feeling. The signs came after that. Looking back I can list them with the terrible clarity of hindsight. The way a room changes when you enter it. The particular silence that is not peaceful but held. My sister's eyes moving away from mine a fraction of a second too quickly. Benjamin's hand on his phone when I approached. A text notification that he turned face down too fast. A name I didn't recognize that I almost asked about and then didn't, because some part of me already knew that asking would require me to deal with the answer. I ignored them. All of them. I ignored them because I had invested too much to begin doubting. Because the story I was telling myself about who we were was too important to put down. Because love, even love that is being quietly betrayed, does not simply switch off like a light. It stays warm long after the warmth has stopped being returned. And so I carried that warmth around in my chest like something precious, not knowing that the thing I was protecting had already been given away. The afternoon everything ended was ordinary in every way until it wasn't. I had been at work, a regular Tuesday, nothing unusual. I was supposed to stay late for a meeting but the meeting was cancelled and I packed up my things and took a bus home. I remember the bus clearly, too full, windows fogged, someone's music leaking thinly from earphones. I remember feeling tired in the way that settles into your bones by midweek. I was thinking about food. I was thinking about taking off my shoes. I was not thinking about anything being wrong. My key turned in the lock the way it always did. The door opened. The apartment was not empty. The first thing I noticed was the shoes. Benjamin's shoes by the door, the brown ones I had bought him for his birthday. And Chisholm's sandals beside them. This was not unusual in itself, both of them had been in my apartment many times at the same time. But the apartment was too quiet for two people to be in it comfortably. It was the quiet of people who have stopped what they were doing because they heard a door. I closed the door behind me. I set my bag down. I stood in the small corridor between the front door and the sitting room. I do not know how long I stood there. Long enough to breathe. Long enough for my body to understand something that my mind was still refusing to process. Then I walked to the bedroom door and opened it. I will not describe in explicit detail what I saw because what I saw is not the point. The point is that it was undeniable. The point is that there was no version of that moment that could be explained or reframed or survived without everything I believed falling apart at the same time. The point is that my sister and the man I was supporting with my own money, the man I had given a key to my home, the man who had told me I was his future, were together, in my bed, in my apartment, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. My sister's face was the face of someone caught. Color draining, eyes wide, body frozen in the way of a person who has run out of options. There was guilt there and shock and something that looked like grief, as though she too was watching something collapse. Benjamin's face was different. I think about his face sometimes, even now. Because it was the face that finally showed me who he was, and it was not a dramatic face. It was not guilty. It was not ashamed. It was slightly inconvenienced. Mildly irritated. The face of someone whose afternoon has been interrupted rather than someone who has been caught betraying the person who was paying his rent. I asked him what this was. I heard my own voice from somewhere outside myself, steady, which surprised me, because nothing inside me was steady. He said, "Why are you overreacting? It is not that deep." Those words. I have turned them over so many times since then. The confidence required to say those words. The absolute assurance that my pain was an overreaction. That what I was looking at was not that deep. That the depth of a betrayal is measured not by what was done but by how much the betrayer is willing to acknowledge. My sister spoke then. She said, "He told me he does not love you. He said I am the one he wants." I turned back to him. I did not speak. I waited. He did not deny it. He looked at me with the same mildly inconvenienced expression and said, "I no really like you. No manage, I just dey manage you." Manage. I had cooked for this man. I had sent money from an account that was not full to spare. I had skipped things I needed so that he could have things he wanted. I had defended him to my sister. I had defended him to myself. I had carried the weight of his life alongside mine for the better part of a year. I had believed, genuinely and completely believed, that I was building something. And he had been managing me. Not loving me. Not even tolerating me with warmth. Managing. Like I was a situation to be handled. A resource to be maintained until something better came along. Something better, in this case, being my younger sister, who was lighter skinned and louder and funnier in rooms full of people and had drawn his eye in the casual way that certain flowers draw certain bees. He turned to Chisholm and said, "Pack your things." And she stood up. I want to sit here for a moment in that detail because it is the detail that undid me most. Not what he said to me. Not the discovery itself. Her standing up. The choice she made in that moment. She looked at me, briefly, the way you look at something you cannot bear to look at for long, and then she turned away and she started gathering her things. And then she walked out of my apartment with the man I had been feeding and clothing and housing for the better part of a year. She walked out. In front of me. My own sister. I stood in the room after they left and I did not move for a long time. The room looked the same. My things were all where I had left them that morning. The bed was unmade. Outside the window, Lagos was doing what Lagos always does, continuing, loudly, without pause, without concern for what was happening inside the apartments it surrounded. I did not cry immediately. Grief of a certain depth does not always announce itself with tears. Sometimes it sits in you like water that has nowhere to go. You feel full and still and slightly unreal, like you have become briefly transparent. I made tea. I do not know why. It was a thing my hands knew how to do, and so they did it while the rest of me tried to understand what had just happened. I sat with the tea and I thought about the last year of my life with the particular clarity that comes after something is over, when you can finally see the shape of a thing because you are no longer inside it. I thought about the first time I gave him money and how easily it had felt like love. I thought about the months of managing and giving and believing. I thought about every sign I had dismissed and every instinct I had silenced. I thought about my sister's eyes avoiding mine and how long they had been doing that and how I had named it something else each time because the real name was too much to carry. I thought about my mother's words. Life will bring you many things with two hands. Learn to look at both hands. I had looked at one hand. The hand that held warmth and attention and the feeling of being chosen. I had not looked at the other hand. The one that was quietly taken while the first hand was given. Days passed. Then weeks. I went to work. I came home. I rebuilt my routine around the absence of him the way you rebuild a room after a piece of furniture is removed, rearranging what remains so the empty space becomes less obvious. It was not easy. Easy would be the wrong word entirely. But I was not broken in the way I had feared in those first days. I was hurt. I was angry. I was grieving not just him but the version of my life I had believed I was building. But I was standing. And standing, some mornings, felt like enough. Chisholm came back 6 weeks later. I knew she would. I do not say that with arrogance. I say it because I had spent 6 weeks thinking about Benjamin and what he was and how he operated, and a man who operates the way he operated does not change the method just because the target changes. He had done to her exactly what he had done to me. Seen her. Studied her. Made her feel chosen. Extracted what he could. And when there was nothing left to extract, he had moved on. The only difference was that she had burned her sister for him, and so when he was done with her, she had nowhere easy to go. She stood at my door on a Saturday morning looking like someone who had not slept properly in weeks. Thinner. Quieter. Her face missing the particular brightness that had always been her most distinct feature. She said, "He used me. I am sorry." I let her in. I want to be precise about what happened next because it was not simple and it was not immediate, and I think when people hear the word forgiveness they imagine it as a single moment, a door opening, arms going around someone, the past dissolving into warmth. It was not like that. It was slow and uncomfortable, and there were conversations that had to happen that neither of us wanted to have. There were things she told me that I had to sit with without reacting in the way I wanted to react. There were things I told her about what her leaving had done to me that she had to sit with too. But she was still my blood. Still the person I had grown up beside. Still the one who knew, without being told, what our particular childhood had cost us both. Benjamin had taken something from the space between us. He had planted something ugly in ground that had been clean. But he had not planted it so deep that it could not be removed. Slowly, with difficulty, we began to remove it. She told me, in pieces, over several conversations, how it had happened. How he had made her feel seen in a way she had not expected. How he had told her that he had never wanted me, that he had been with me only because I was useful, that she was the one he had wanted from the beginning. She had believed him because she had wanted to believe him. She had not asked herself what kind of man says those things about a woman who is housing him and feeding him. She had not asked herself, until it was too late, what a man who will betray one woman so completely would do with another. He had lasted 3 weeks with her before the request started. Money for this. Help with that. By week 5 she had given him more than she could afford, and he had grown distant in the exact way he had grown distant with me when the well began to run dry. By week 6 he had stopped answering her calls with any consistency. By the time she came back to my door, he had simply stopped calling altogether. I was not glad. I want to say that clearly because it would be easy to assume that I was glad, that there was something satisfying about the symmetry of what happened to her. There was not. There was only the particular sadness of watching someone you love learn an expensive lesson. There was a night, some weeks after Chisholm came back, when I went outside. It was late. The city had settled into its nighttime version of itself, not quiet. Lagos is never quiet, but reduced, muted, the daytime noise compressed into something lower and more distant. I stood outside and I looked up at the sky and I said his name. Not because I believed anything mystical would happen. Not because I was casting anything or calling anything down. But because I had been carrying something for a long time and I needed to put it somewhere outside of myself. Benjamin. I said what I needed to say. About what he had done. About what it had cost. About the particular arrogance required to take from someone who trusted you and feel nothing about the taking. I said it clearly, to the open air, and when I was finished I felt something release in my chest, not completely, not all at once, but enough to breathe more fully than I had in months. The elders in some traditions say that words spoken with truth in them do not disappear. That they go somewhere. I do not know if I believe that in any literal sense. What I know is that speaking the truth of what happened, out loud, to no audience but the sky, did something to me that weeks of internal processing had not fully done. It made it real in a different way. It made it finished in a way it had not been finished before. I am not the same person I was before Benjamin. I want to be careful here because that sentence can be read 2 ways and only one of them is true. I am not less. I am not more cautious in the way that becomes a closing off, a refusal to be open, a protection that costs more than what it protects against. I have not become the person who sees every act of kindness as a manipulation or every gentleman as a predator in disguise. What I am is more awake. I know now what it looks like when someone studies you instead of sees you. I know the difference between a person who asks how you are because they want to know and a person who asks how you are because they are mapping your weak points. I know what it feels like when generosity becomes a habit of self-erasure, and I know how to name it before it becomes the whole story. I know that loving someone is not the same as losing yourself in them. That support is not the same as subsidy. That a person who accepts everything you give without asking what it costs you does not love you, they consume you. I know that the signs always come. The river always warns before it floods. And I know now, the way I did not know before, that silencing your own instincts to preserve a feeling is one of the most expensive things a person can do. Benjamin is somewhere in this city. I do not know exactly where and I have not looked. I have no interest in knowing where he is or what he is doing or whether what he planted that Tuesday afternoon has grown into something that found its way back to him. I leave that to things larger than me. What I know is what I have. I have my apartment, still small, still paid for with my own hands. I have my routine, rebuilt and solid. I have my sister, changed between us, different than before, but present, and walking, and slowly becoming something we can both trust again. I have my mother's voice in my head on the days I need it. And I have the knowledge, and at a price I did not choose to pay, that I am someone worth far more than being managed. That is not nothing. That is, in the end, everything.